All right, comedy fans. Now, when I was going back on Netflix and rewatching some of comedy specials from like Cedric the Entertainer, Dave Chappelle, and I began to think, I grew up, I was born in 91 and I grew up watching a lot of comedians like Steve Harvey, the rest of the Kings of Comedy, and Bruce on Comic View, and the list goes on. But one comedian stood out from the rest, and I feel like a lot of people feel the same way. Aside from Richard Pryor, of course, Eddie Murphy is definitely one of my favorites from, Raw and Delirious, but also to his many movies where he portrayed multiple characters and just transformed into the person he was playing. It wasn't like Martin playing Shanae on the Martin sitcom. It was like, Eddie Murphy just transforming. Like, you couldn't even tell that was Eddie Murphy. You literally felt like it was a completely different person. And I love, like Coming to America and The Nutty Professor, but I began to think to myself, it would be great if Eddie Murphy did stand up at least one more special, and then he could say, you know what, I'm officially retired, that's it, because he literally stepped away after Raw at pretty much the pinnacle of his comedian star power on stage as a stand-up comedian. But I remember him receiving the Mark Twain Award a couple of years ago, and he did like a 5-minute. He says it wasn't a stand-up set, but it felt that way. He talked about Bill Cosby and whatnot, pretty much showing that Eddie Murphy has not lost any of his comedic timing as well as his impressions. But I began to think to myself, in the world we live in today, because a lot of people, like I look at the comments on videos where Eddie Murphy's talking about Coming to America sequel. I think he was on Ellen talking about, how he doesn't want to make any more movies that suck, and just other interviews. Like, I believe on the anniversary edition of Delirious, I think I actually own that, he did a behind the scenes interview, and he talked about how he talked with his mom once, and whenever he tells his mom that he might do something, then he might actually do it, stand up again. But he says he has to practice. He can't just get up on stage because he has like 20 plus years to condense into like an hour long 90-minute special, whatever the case may be. So pretty much he'll pull like a Dave Chappelle or Kevin Hart or Chris Rock, where he would go to comedy clubs, get a set together, and then eventually maybe get on stage to do a new special. But the world we live in today, the millions of people out there that say they would love to see Eddie Murphy and whatnot get on stage and do another stand-up, it's sad to say that probably most of those people would be the same ones to condemn him if he were to say something that they didn't like. Because the world we live in today being so offended, you look at shows like Raw and Delirious where he talks about, homosexuals and just all those in AIDS and whatnot. That stuff was raw, no pun intended, back then. But if he talked about that now, it would just be career damaging. But at the same time, that's what made Eddie Murphy stand out from the rest, because that was his raw style of comedy. So personally speaking, I would love to see Eddie Murphy do another stand-up, but at the same time, I can see why he might be reluctant to do so, based off the fact that society today would just like condemn him if he said one off comment or whatever. It's just like Dave Chappelle, where he said something about transgenders in his first Netflix special, and then he touched upon that in his second Netflix special that came out on New Year's. But I mean, honestly, Eddie Murphy, he was a trailblazer. I would really love to see him in one more stand-up routine, just one. I will be satisfied. Of course, it will probably leave me wanting more, but if I got just one more Eddie Murphy special, I would love it. So with that being said, do you feel similar to the way I feel in terms of I want Eddie Murphy to do a special, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be backlash from the easily offended country that we live in today? But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on Eddie Murphy doing another stand-up, or do you think he'll just stick to doing more movies? And hey, just be sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already.